Hi, my name is Laura Delano, and this is Recovering from Psychiatry. This video today is for those of you out there who are in the middle of grieving and mourning and trying to make sense of the loss that you have experienced as the result of uh, being a patient in the mental health system. It's a really important and meaningful experience to go through this grieving process. And if anyone is telling you otherwise, just try to remind yourself that they likely just truly can't grasp or won't grasp just how profound the loss is that we endure as a result of being labeled mentally ill and put on psychiatric drugs, especially those of us who've been put on psychiatric drugs for long periods of time. I know for me, I was in a process of serious grief and mourning for, I'd say, around the first year after I began to read and educate myself about this story that I'd been told by some of the best doctors in the country. The story that told me I had a lifelong brain condition that would require lifelong medication use, lifelong therapy, and the occasional hospitalization. When I began to really dig beneath that story, and I began to discover, who constructed this story and what were their motives, and is there any valid evidence behind this story? When I began to tease all of this away, and in a very short period of time, my entire reality fell apart. My entire identity, everything I thought about who I was and how I fit into the world, which was bipolar. I was bipolar, and that was the lens through which I saw myself and the world around me. That all fell away in a very short period of time after I began to read books like Anatomy of an Epidemic and Mad in America and They Say You're Crazy and, a whole list of books. And I was left with nothing. I was left with a total loss of identity, and also with the realization that the previous 14 years of my life, from the moment I saw my first therapist till the moment I made these discoveries, that it didn't have to go the way that it did, and that all the harm and trauma and pain that I experienced through those years didn't have to go the way it went, and that was a really hard reality to face. I think first I went through a period of denial, saying this can't be true. These people are crazy for saying that mental illness isn't real. I am bipolar. It makes perfect sense. I fit into the DSM criteria perfectly. How could this not be true? And then, of course, when you step back and look at our society and at the depth and the breadth of power that this story has within our society, it sounds crazy to call it into question and to say, actually, no, there's never been any evidence found for a biological condition in the brain. And yes, there's never actually been a study showing that these SSRI drugs you've been put on are statistically more effective than placebos. And so when all of this really sunk in, and when I moved through the denial and I really faced the truth of the matter, which was that my entire adolescence and my entire adulthood up to that point had been taken off what was a very healthy path and put on a path of just progressive physical illness, emotional dysfunction, cognitive dysfunction, social paralysis, loss of meaning, loss of creativity, loss of sexuality, loss of interest, loss of relationships, loss of drive. I mean, when that really hit me, I went into a state of total paralysis, and I was convinced that my life had been wasted, that all of those years had been wasted years, that I'd been robbed, that psychiatry and the mental health system had stolen my life from me. And I stayed in that place for a while. And if you're in that place right now, that's completely okay. And it's a really healthy part of the process of grieving. And so in looking back at the last 3.5 years, I see that first year of psychiatric liberation for me, while I was coming off of the drugs and beginning to heal from the drugs, and as I was really absorbing in these alternative narratives and frameworks for understanding the experiences that I'd had, that had been called bipolar. As I was moving through all of that, I was doing so. I was moving through all of those experiences without an inner anchor, like an inner core sense of myself, because any sense of myself that I'd had through all those years was tied into thinking of myself as being bipolar. So in that first year, I had nothing at the core of who I was to rely on and to hold on to. I was just, I felt like a shell of a person, and I felt completely disoriented in my life, because I'd been on this path, albeit one that was comprised of locked psych wards and 5 pill bottles and daily thoughts of suicide and total isolation and hopelessness. But all of that, it was a path and that I was on, and then all of a sudden I wasn't on that path, and I didn't know where I was going, and I sure as hell didn't know who I was. And so I think I became a victim for a time, because it was the only thing that made sense to me. If I'm not bipolar, and if I don't need these drugs, and I don't have a chemical imbalance, then what am I? All I was for a time was a victim of psychiatry. And as I said, I needed to be there for a while. And if that's where you're at, that is a part of the process, and just allow yourself to feel that way. What I came to realize is the more I healed from the trauma of the drugs, the more my brain healed, because indeed our brains are injured from this so-called treatment, and it takes time to heal, and it takes time for our cognitive processes to get activated and to get going again. But yes, as I moved forward, what I found was that this victim identity that I'd internalized was in fact keeping me attached to psychiatry in a very emotional way. And that, yes, I was no longer psychiatry's patient, but I was psychiatry's victim. And that was giving psychiatry just as much power, just in a different way. And so my release from the victim identity that I had really came in large part to that realization that I no longer want to be an emotional slave to psychiatry, and that means accepting that all of those years of my life, yes, they went down a very dark path as the direct result of being psychiatrized, but that's in the past. All I can do is move forward. And what's ended up happening as I've moved further and further into healing is that all of those dark experiences of my past, which I once saw as basically wasted time, wasted years, being robbed of health and, robbed of a life. I actually now look back on all of those years with gratitude. And I say this a lot, and people oftentimes are just totally perplexed by how I could say something like that. But what I've really come to believe is that in out of these very traumatic and dehumanizing experiences that we have as the result of becoming mental patients, arises just tremendous wisdom and empathy and sensitivity, and perspective and appreciation. So much of who I am today, and so much of the joy and the gratitude that I feel in my life, even when in the midst of intense pain or anxiety or struggle, so much of it actually results from all of those years of being completely separated from it. I have this deep appreciation for life today that I think I can only have because I was so disconnected from life for so many years. So it's almost as though I'm now savoring every second of my day, even when it's painful, because I feel so connected to it. And because I know what it's like to be completely disconnected from life. Of course, also all of those years of dehumanization have given me my passion, which is to do activism and to write and to support people who are on their own journey of psychiatric liberation, to be a part of community organizing and building alternatives to the mental health system. All of these really exciting, amazing opportunities are now coming into my life because directly as a result of having 14 years of my life swallowed up by the mental health system. And so I think it's easy to say that through the first 3.5 years of my liberation process. I mean, had I said this to myself in the first year, I don't know if I would have believed myself, or I might have even been offended. And so I think if you're not at the place where you've accepted what's happened to you, that's okay. But I think it's important to say that for me, I eventually needed to let go, and I needed to move forward into this post-psychiatry life that I'm now in, really for my sake, not for anyone else's sake, not for psychiatry's sake. I've accepted what happened to me, not out of the goodness of my heart because I want psychiatry to know I'm not mad at it, which really is not what any of this is about. It's for myself. I reached a point at which it was no longer a worthy emotional investment to think of myself as a victim. And the more I was doing so, the more enslaved I was becoming to psychiatry. So go through your process of grief and mourning, cry, scream. If you need to act out physically, find a safe space where you won't get locked up, and punch something or kick something or just scratch something. Do whatever you need to do to release the anger that you feel, because it is healthy and valid and meaningful. And if you need to just cry and cry and cry, just release the tears, because they are healthy and meaningful and completely valid. What we endure is the results of having our identities and our health and our lives stripped away from us at the hands of a label and a bottle of pills. No human being should endure. But the truth of the matter is that it's happened to us, and all we have is the present going forward. And I truly believe that to be human is to be embedded with the never-ending opportunity to transform. I really believe that, and that's rooted in my own personal experience. But it's up to us to believe in that for ourselves. And for me, as long as I stayed in victim mode, I was unable to truly transform who I was. And so I encourage you to keep exploring your feelings, however painful they are, and keep allowing yourself to feel them. And if the people in your network are not supporting you in feeling them, then try to find others who do and look to them for support and validation of your grief. And keep opening yourself up to the universe for opportunities to come alive again, and for opportunities to connect with a sense of meaning, because you have your whole life, no matter how young or old you are. If you've been psychiatrized and you are now awakening to your psychiatrization, you have your whole life ahead of you to reclaim. And I believe in your capacity to reclaim it and to completely liberate yourself from psychiatry, both as a patient and as a victim. So I send you love and liberation as you move forward on your journey. And remember that everything you're feeling is totally valid. You're not crazy, no matter what your doctors or your family members or your friends or your partners are telling you. Keep putting one foot in front of the next and feel your feelings, and to let your mind tell you what it's going to tell you, because it's all a healthy response to this really traumatic experience that's happened to you. And from all of this, you will be presented with amazing opportunities to redefine yourself in whatever way works for you, and to reconnect to yourself and to the world. So take care, and here's to psychiatric liberation for all. Thank you.